A group of thieves escape from a crime scene after robbing a bank. The cops immediately chase them, but the robbers keep moving further away as they cause a commotion on the road. While this is happening, a reckless superhero named Hancock sleeps on a bench outside a supermarket. Out of nowhere, a young boy wakes him up and informs him of what's happening. Hancock doesn't look pleased to have had his sleep disturbed, and he insults the boy as he walks away.
What, you want a cookie? Hell on my face.
Even though he doesn't feel like doing anything, Hancock eventually takes his bottle of beer and flies away from the scene. On his way to catch the bad guys, he bumps into a flock of birds in the sky, but he quickly gets past them. Shortly after, he sees the robbers still shooting at the cops as they try to get further away. He then destroys a part of the car and enters to warn the men to pull over so that the cops can catch them. The men are shocked by this, but Hancock says he doesn't really care what they did, and he just wants the chase to end. The men don't listen to him, and they even shoot him. But interestingly, it turns out that he's bulletproof. As the robbers also realize this, they look really scared because they've now made Hancock angry. Almost immediately, Hancock stops the van and carries it around while threatening to drop the men. The robbers beg Hancock not to do this, but he doesn't listen to them. He then crashes the car against several buildings in the city before handing them over to the police. Later that night, Hancock sits at a bar where he watches the news and sees the police chief lamenting about the superhero's reckless ways. The chief also mentions that Hancock's recent superhero act will cost the city about $6 million in repairs. He adds that it's high time they got Hancock to stop using his superpowers so that the cops in the city will do their jobs well. Hancock doesn't seem bothered by what the police chief said, and even though there's a woman staring at him strangely at the bar, others appear to be admiring him. The next day, a PR specialist named Ray goes to a pharmaceutical company to discuss his idea for a charity initiative called All Heart.
Ray's like the Bono of PR.
At a meeting with the company's board members, Ray mentions that his idea involves spreading love and helping people. He adds that he wants the company to be among the first to engage in his charitable venture and have his logo on their product. As the board members continue listening to him, Ray says that the company can qualify by selling their new TB drug for free. Everyone at the meeting is shocked to hear this.
Did you say free?
I did.
And they ask Ray if he knows the implications of selling for free. Ray says it shouldn't matter, and that the drug will only be sold for free to those who need it but can't afford it. The board members can't believe he's really serious, and they send him out after asking if he's okay.
Are you a crackpot?
On his way home, Ray looks disappointed about how the meeting went, and he calls his wife, Mary, to inform her that he'll soon be back home. Suddenly, a train starts approaching the city, and Ray realizes that his car is on the train track. To make matters worse, he's also stuck in traffic and can't move forward or backward because there are other cars behind him. He also tries to leave the car but realizes that the seatbelt is stuck. As the train gets closer, Ray looks resigned to his fate, but Hancock suddenly shows up and flips Ray's car before stopping the train. The car lands on another woman's car, and Ray quickly asks if she's okay because she could have been hurt. The woman says she's fine, and Ray looks happy to have survived the crash. As Hancock is about to walk away from the scene, the other car owners in the area accuse him of being reckless because he could have killed someone. They also point out that Hancock destroyed the train and left all the coaches scattered. They add that it's how he has always behaved and left the government to use taxpayers' money to fix his mess.
She should sue you!
Hancock doesn't seem to care, and as he gets called several names, he sounds rude and insults them back. Ray sees this and immediately tells everyone that Hancock should actually be praised for saving him. He says that even though Hancock should have carried his car away instead of flipping it on another car, the important thing is that the superhero saved his life. He then thanks Hancock and tells everyone to do the same.
No, thank you.
But they all walk away. Following this, Ray asks if Hancock can fly him and his car home. Hancock doesn't seem to mind, and after a while, he drops Ray's car just outside his house before dragging it into the garage. Ray's son, Aaron, looks really happy to see Hancock and says he likes him a lot. Just then, Ray's wife, Mary, comes out to see what's happening. As she sees Hancock, she looks shocked and wonders what he's doing at the house. And Ray explains to her that the hero saved his life life.
He saved your life?
Mary doesn't look happy to have Hancock around, but as he says he's leaving, Ray asks if he would like to eat dinner with his family. Hancock says he's interested, and Ray invites him in even though Mary looks worried. Shortly after, Mary serves the food, and as Ray takes his portion, he tells Hancock about how he and Mary always make spaghetti as part of a family tradition. He then asks Aaron about school, and if a boy named Michelle still bullies him. Aaron says he still does, and Ray tells Hancock about his son's bully. Even though Ray mentions that he's teaching his son some conflict resolution skills,
That's some good meatballs, boy.
Hancock advises Aaron to beat up the bully. Mary cannot believe this, and she tells Hancock to stop giving Aaron bad advice. She also sounds really angry as she says that not everything should lead to violence. Hancock doesn't get why she's so pissed, and after he's done with his meal, he says he's leaving. As he heads out,
Got a toilet?
Yep.
Ray stops him and says that even though he only works with companies, he believes he can do something to improve Hancock's public image. He adds that people should be looking up to him and asking for his autograph instead of insulting him all the time. Hancock doesn't look interested in this, but Ray still gives him his card. Later that night, Ray tells Mary about his plan to work on Hancock's public image, but she can't seem to understand why he wants to do that. Ray believes he can change Hancock's life because it's quite obvious that he only needs people to care about what he does. Mary still doesn't think Hancock is worth saving,
I think you're wasting your time with this guy.
and she adds that guys like that only know how to break things. Ray says he can tell that Mary hates Hancock, but she mentions that she can't hate him because she barely knows him. She adds that she only sees the messy things he does on the news. Unfortunately, Hancock appears to be on the roof, and he looks disappointed to hear Mary talk so badly about him. The next day, after thinking about what Ray said, Hancock decides to pay him a visit. As he lands near Ray's house, he breaks a part of the road, and Michelle insults him while playing with his friends. Ray hears this and tells Michelle to stop insulting him, but the boy doesn't listen to him. Ray then asks what his name is, and as he says it, he realizes that Michelle is the same boy who bullies Aaron. He then tells Michelle to leave Aaron alone because he seems like a really good kid. Michelle doesn't seem to care, and he insults both Hancock and Aaron. Hancock is not pleased with this, and as Michelle keeps insulting him, he throws the boy into the sky. At the same time, Ray comes out of his house and looks happy to see that Hancock came back to talk about their deal. As he says they'll achieve a lot together, Michelle falls from the sky, but Hancock catches him. While Michelle then cries and walks away, Ray looks surprised and asks why Hancock threw Michelle into the sky.
Not okay.
He adds that it's part of the things they'll work on to change his image in the eye of the public. Shortly after, they enter the house and Hancock asks where Mary is. Ray says she took Aaron to his soccer game and she'll soon be back. He then tells Hancock that after reviewing some videos that made people hate him as a superhero, he thinks they need to start by correcting some of the things he always does. As Hancock keeps listening to him,
No, I haven't done that. I'm in PR.
Ray shows him some comic books about superheroes and asks what he thinks about them. Hancock doesn't give Ray the answer he wants, and he says he believes that the superhero only pretends not to care about people because he knows they don't like him. Suddenly, Mary comes in and looks shocked to see Hancock inside the house. Ray then mentions that they're already working together, but she asks if he hasn't seen the news. Ray doesn't know what she's talking about, but as the news comes on, he sees a reporter informing the public that there's already a warrant for Hancock's arrest. Hancock doesn't look bothered because he knows they can't catch him, but as Mary expects Ray to give up on his case, he says he has a genius idea. He then mentions that since they're trying to change Hancock's public image, they can start by making him accept his arrest and go to prison.
I say you go.
Mary is shocked to hear this, but Ray says it's a plan that can quickly change the public's opinion of him. Hancock doesn't like this, but as Ray convinces him, he changes his mind. Shortly after, Ray takes Hancock to the police headquarters and and makes him give a speech, apologizing to everyone in the city for how he has always behaved.
After all, I'm the only one of my kind.
Even though he gets insulted by the city's residents, Hancock keeps reading his apology speech and says he'll take anger and alcohol management treatments while in prison. After a while, Hancock gets taken to prison, and as he enters the cell block, he realizes that all the criminals there don't like him. As they mention that he's the one who put them in jail, he says sorry to them.
I can understand you feeling some kind of way about that.
But some of the men still try to attack him. Just then, he beats them up and heads to his cell. The next day, Ray visits Hancock and tells him that the judge wants him to be in jail for 8 years. Hancock cannot believe this, and he attempts to break out, but Ray calls him a coward. Hancock tries to attack him, but Ray says he needs to stop acting like he doesn't care because it will only make him miserable. He adds that Hancock was born to be a hero, and he needs to accept it. As Hancock thinks about this, Ray tells him that if he stays in prison, it won't be long before the police chief calls for his help, and at that time they'll give him a hero that everyone likes. Hancock finally decides to stay in prison, and Ray starts teaching him things he needs to be doing differently. Hancock also attends an alcohol abuse support group program in prison, but he doesn't say anything at the meeting. Much later, Ray tells Hancock that he'll have to work on his landing and avoid crashing into buildings or public property. He also tells Ray that if he arrives at a crime scene where his help is needed, he has to commend the officers for doing a good job.
Pass.
Hancock wonders why he has to do this, even though he's the one who will save people. But Ray says it's just to get on the good side of the cops. After 5 days in prison, the crime rate in the city increases, and people start having different opinions about whether Hancock should be released or not. The next day, Mary and Aaron visit Hancock in prison, and he looks surprised that Ray didn't come with them. Mary then gives him some spaghetti and says that she only came because Aaron wanted to see him. Hancock appreciates this, and as he eats his food, Mary tells him not to let Ray down because he's a good man.
Whatever this is you're doing, don't let him down.
Before Hancock can respond, Mary takes Aaron away even though he wants to stay longer. The next day, Ray brings Hancock a costume he'll wear when the chief of police calls for his help. Hancock sees the costume and says he won't wear it, but Ray mentions that it's all part of his rebranding process. Hancock then asks if anyone even misses him outside because it's already been 2 weeks. Ray says he's sure the cops will need Hancock's help soon, and that he just needs to be patient. Later that day, while Hancock is playing basketball in the yard, the ball goes outside the fence, and he jumps over to get it. The prison guards are shocked by this, and they wonder if Hancock will escape. However, instead of taking his chances and running away, now that he's outside the fence, he flies back inside because he still has hope that Ray's plan will work. Later that night, while Hancock is at the support group meeting, he's told to say something, but he says he's not interested. The other inmates then encourage him to say something because it's always good to share how he's feeling. Hancock doesn't really care about this, but as he just says his name and mentions that he drinks a lot, the inmates clap for him for finally saying something during the meeting. The next day, while Hancock is still sleeping, a prison guard comes over to wake him up because the police chief has finally called to ask for his help. Hancock looks surprised by this, but he quickly gets cleaned up so he can leave the prison. While the cops are in a gunfight with some robbers who have captured some hostages in a bank, Hancock arrives at the scene, and everyone looks shocked. The cops then inform Hancock that they're currently trying to save a cop who is trapped in between the gunfight. Hancock says he'll handle it, but as he's about to walk away, he commends all the cops for doing a good job before his arrival.
Good job.
Just then, Hancock walks through the gunfight and saves the trapped cop. After this, he flies into the sky and the robbers look scared because they can't see him anymore. Suddenly, he starts attacking them one after the other until only their boss, Red, is left inside the bank. Despite this, Red says he won't surrender because he's with a detonator that controls the explosives strapped to the hostages. He then mentions that he wants Hancock to break into the vault and bring all the money inside for him. Hancock says he won't do it.
I'm gonna have to say no to that.
And as Red threatens to detonate the explosives, the superhero attacks him with a metal plate. Shortly after, Hancock comes out of the bank with all the hostages. He then hands over the detonator to one of the cops, after which he commends all of them again for doing a good job. The cops also commend him, and everyone at the scene starts clapping for him. Ray watches this on the news and looks really happy because Hancock is now loved by the public. Later that night, Ray and Mary take Hancock out for dinner at a fancy restaurant. As they get there, some of Hancock's fans greet him, and Ray looks really proud of what he has done. After they eventually sit down, Ray says he'd love to go on more dates with Mary, and Hancock asks how they met.
How'd you two meet?
Ray then mentions that she's actually his second wife. He adds that after Aaron's mom died during his delivery, he started taking care of the baby on his own until he saw Mary at a supermarket where he was buying some things for Aaron. Ray says she was so nice to him and he just knew he'd marry her. Ray then tells Hancock to talk about how he ended up with powers, but he says he can't remember anything from when he was young. He adds that he only remembers waking up in a hospital after he had been badly beaten up by some bad guys. Ray sounds shocked to hear that someone could beat Hancock, and he asks if the superhero didn't have powers before. Hancock says he doesn't know for sure, and that he only discovered that he had powers when a nurse tried to inject him, but the needle broke. Hancock then mentions that it hurts to not be able to know who he was in the past because he can't believe no one came to see him in the hospital. Ray feels sorry for him, but Hancock says it doesn't matter anymore because the person is likely dead. As Ray asks how he knows, he says it's because it happened 80 years ago. He adds that he doesn't age, and he has looked the same since his accident. Ray asks why all these facts about him weren't in the news, but Hancock says his story was very popular many years ago.
I don't age.
Mary can't help but cry as she hears Hancock talk about being abandoned, and Ray consoles her. She then says sorry to Hancock, but he says it's not her fault because she didn't do anything. Shortly after, Hancock carries Ray home after he gets drunk at the restaurant. As he puts him on his bed, Hancock heads to the living room and tells Mary that he's leaving.
He's asleep.
Mary says she hopes Hancock doesn't think Ray usually drinks like that, and he says he's not really bothered about it. Just then, he gets really attracted to her. But as he gets closer, Mary suddenly throws him out of the house with her powers. A part of the house breaks off, and the refrigerator appears to have been thrown out too. As Hancock wonders what just happened, Mary speeds up to him and says she'll kill him if Ray finds out about her. She then walks back to the house, but Hancock still looks confused. In the morning, Ray comes out to the living room and sees the broken part of the house. As he looks shocked and wonders what happened, Mary says that Hancock sneezed and blew off that part of the building.
Hancock sneezed, huh?
Ray cannot believe this, and Mary says it's one of the reasons why she didn't want Hancock to keep coming to the house. As Ray still looks confused, Mary serves him breakfast and tells him about a vacation trip she wants them to take as soon as possible. Ray doesn't get why she's in a hurry, but she says she just feels like spending time with him away from the city. Just then, Hancock arrives at the house, and Mary quickly mentions that she has already told Ray about how he destroyed the house by sneezing. Hancock realizes that she doesn't want Ray to know about what happened, so he backs up her lie. He also tells Ray that it sometimes happens like that when he inhales dust. Almost immediately, Ray gets a call from one of his business partners, and as he answers it, Hancock tries to hurt Mary by stabbing her and hitting her with something, but he realizes that she's just like him. Mary doesn't like how he's trying to hurt her when Ray is still in the living room. But as Hancock says they need to talk, she agrees to meet him later at his trailer. Following this, Hancock leaves and says he'll be waiting for her. Elsewhere, Red forms an alliance with some inmates who also hate Hancock for sending them to jail. He then tells them that they must leave prison to find Hancock and take their revenge. Later that day, Mary keeps her promise and goes to see Hancock at his trailer. When she gets there, she says she'll only answer his questions if he agrees to leave the city. Hancock says he's not leaving, but as she turns back to enter her car, he agrees to do what she wants, as long as she's honest with him. Just then, they enter his trailer, and Hancock asks who they are. Mary says they're like gods and angels, but people now call them superheroes. Hancock then asks if there are more people like them.
Are there more of us?
And Mary says there were, but they're now dead. She adds that it's just 2 of them that are left in the world. Hancock still feels attracted to Mary, and he asks what they are to each other.
Who are we to each other?
Mary says they're brother and sister, but Hancock doesn't believe her. He then mentions that their deal is off, and he'd love to see what Ray thinks of her. As he flies away, Mary follows him and eventually pushes him to fall and destroy one of the roads in the city. Everyone looks shocked to see Hancock, but Mary suddenly shows up and says that he needs to leave her and her family because she doesn't want him to ruin her happy life like he has always done. Hancock looks shocked to hear this, but as he asks Mary about his past, she doesn't tell him anything. He eventually calls her crazy, and this gets her pissed, so she slams a truck on him.
Better not hit me with that truck!
He survives this, but they start fighting and destroying parts of the city. Meanwhile, Ray is in a meeting with his business partners, and they're all shocked to see that it's suddenly snowing in the city. As they wonder what's happening, Hancock and Mary crash against the wall and wipe out the entire window in Ray's meeting room. Ray doesn't know what to think, but as he looks outside and sees Hancock fighting with Mary, he looks confused. Hancock then stops Mary from attacking him, and he says he's sorry for whatever he did because he can't even remember it. He also says she's very beautiful, but before Mary says anything, she sees Ray looking at them, and this leaves her disappointed because their relationship could now be ruined. A while later, Ray arrives home from work, but sees that Mary is already there too. As he says she needs to explain how she could fly, Hancock also comes into the house. Mary then tells Ray that aside from flying, she's strong too. She adds that she and Hancock were created as pairs, and that they'll always be drawn to each other. Ray asks why she didn't tell him what she was, but she says she didn't know how to say it. She also mentions that she and Hancock used to be married,
He's my husband.
but she broke up with him years ago. Ray asks why she decided to be with him when she knew that fate would always bring her close to Hancock. Mary then says she has spent so much time on Earth to know that fate means nothing because people can choose what they want. Hancock asks why she chose not to remind him of who he was, and she says she didn't think he'd miss something he couldn't remember. As she says it's all too complicated for her, she walks out of the room and Hancock doesn't know what to say. Later that night, Hancock goes to a supermarket, and even though he has been sober since he went to prison, he decides to buy some bottles of beer. As he gets to the counter to pay, the cashier signals to him that some thieves are under his desk. Hancock immediately pulls one out and throws him outside. The other robber brings out his gun and threatens to kill the cashier if he's not allowed to leave. Hancock advises the robber against doing that, but he still pulls the trigger just before the superhero knocks him out. As Hancock then says sorry to the cashier for the damage done to the store,
Sorry about your window.
Hancock notices that he's feeling different. Almost immediately, he notices that he's bleeding, but before he can realize what's happening, he falls down and passes out. The cashier calls an ambulance for him, and Hancock is then taken to the hospital. After a while, Ray and Aaron hear on the news that Hancock is in the hospital, and this leaves them shocked. Ray eventually takes Aaron to the hospital, but as they get there, some reporters start asking questions about what happened. Meanwhile, Mary finds her way into the hospital and goes to see Hancock while he's looking weak on the bed. She then tells him that he needs to leave the city because when he gets close to her, they both lose their powers. She says it's how it has always been, and in all the times he nearly died, it was to save her. She adds that 80 years ago they were attacked in an alley and Hancock got badly injured. Unfortunately, this made him lose his memory, so she decided to leave so that he wouldn't have to die because of her. Hancock asks why they're like that,
Why?
and she says she doesn't know. However, she mentions that they were likely made like that so that they would live human lives and die one day. Hancock looks confused, but Mary says he's born to be a hero and that those who created them deliberately made him like that so that the world will have someone to save them whenever they need help. Meanwhile, Ray and Aaron finally enter the elevator, but Red also appears to be inside with them after escaping prison. As they then reach Hancock's room, they see Mary inside. So Ray takes Aaron away so that they won't interrupt their conversation. Suddenly, the bad guys bring out their guns, and one of them shoots Mary while trying to kill Hancock. Hancock immediately attacks him with his bed, and he finds a room to put Mary, who is now bleeding. After he leaves her there for a doctor to take care of her, Hancock heads out and kills Red's men one after the other. While Mary is receiving treatment, she appears to be in serious pain, and Ray looks sad because there's nothing he can do to help. One of Red's men eventually stabs Hancock in the back, and as he also gets beaten, this affects Mary's health. Hancock manages to throw the criminal out of the building, but as he walks away, Red shoots him from behind. He then says it's time for Hancock to move on. Hancock tries to get close to him, but Red keeps shooting at him, and this makes Mary lose consciousness. As the doctors try to revive her, Red nearly shoots Hancock again, but Ray cuts his hand and beats him up. He then calls the doctors to come and help Hancock, who is now bleeding on the floor. Suddenly, Hancock finds the strength to stand up, and as he sees Mary still unconscious in the hospital room, he jumps out of the building even though he's still weak. However, as he keeps moving further away, Mary slowly regains consciousness until she finally gets better. A while later, Mary takes a walk with Ray and Aaron near a public park. As Ray asks Mary about the things that happened in the past, he gets a call from Hancock. After he answers it, Hancock asks if he's outside, and as Ray says he is, the superhero tells him to look up. As he does, Ray sees his All Heart logo on the moon, and he looks really happy. Mary also looks happy for him, and Hancock tells Ray that he'll change the world one day. Shortly after, the call ends, and Hancock flies around his new city to find the next place to stop a crime. While everyone in the city saw a reckless and rude superhero who only cared about himself, Ray saw someone who needed help. He recognized that even the strongest among us can struggle. We should all learn that people aren't often as complex as they seem, and sometimes what appears to be arrogance or carelessness might just be a call for support.